Bode, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
I have to start with this because this is really where we met, right? In 2006, you said to Rolling Stone, you said, right now, if you want to cheat, you can. Barry Bonds and those guys are just knowingly cheating, but there's all sorts of loopholes. If you say that it has to be knowingly, you do what Lance Armstrong and all those guys do. Every morning, the doctor gives them a box of pills and they don't ask anything. They just take the pills. You said that, and I was like, who is this guy? Like, and in that time in my life, I was like, I am going to nuke this guy. So we were Nike guys. I call Nike. I'm like, screw this guy. So the reason I wanted to start with it and read it, two parts. One, I'm terribly sorry. And two, the cool thing is like in 2 or 3 years later, I'm at a restaurant in Austin. I don't even remember who I was with. And the lady comes over with this glass of wine that's literally about to flow over the top. She's like, hey, this guy over here bought you a glass of wine. And I'm like, that is the biggest adult pour I've ever seen in my life. And I look over, and it's you. And I was like, that is the fucking raddest thing ever. Like, that guy could have poured the glass of wine. I deserved to have the glass of wine poured over my head. And you're like, no, man, it's all good. So
I think it was an interesting time because I had no intent to try to poke anybody. I wasn't. It was just simply an irritation of my own, totally independent of any of the people I was sort of mentioning in the quote. Was, the system was just so screwed up, and the way the perception from fans to media to corporate America, all the sponsors, was just, it was shaping it and making it impossible for people, or not impossible, really, really difficult, and not very conducive to people taking accountability for what they were doing or any of the stuff. It just didn't make sense. And I had tons of baseball player friends, and in my sport, I was dealing with people who, to one degree or another, had been involved in high level sports, whether it was the nutrition side or the supplementation side, to varying degrees. So I was speaking from a place of knowledge, but it wasn't trying to be accusational. It was more informative in a sense of like, look, this is how it is. This is the reality that we live in. How about instead of whining about it or bitching about it, we just fix it? Like, to me, it was more a matter of trying to figure out if it was my job or if it was somebody else's job to try to find accountability in that. Because I think in that is how you move things forward. And what was happening, in my opinion, in my sport as well as other sports, was this ongoing denial when then, ex-athletes, Greg LeMond or, Miguel Indurain, guys who, I had exposure to over there, Francesco Moser, who's, a great cyclist. And they were like 100% we were on these various supplements or what people would call doping outside the sport. But in reality, it was simply the program that you were on. And the problem came from not accepting what was actually reality and this denial of reality. And I was young too. I mean, I said a lot of stupid things in my life, and it was, I don't think that was necessarily one of those stupid things. I just wish that I'd had a better way of expressing what I was trying to get across. But in the end, it was, it was funny, and it was, you roasted me pretty good at the ESPYs, which was great. And, like I said, I really don't.
I forgot about that.
I don't really get mad at anybody ever. I mean, I just don't. And I know I'm as capable as anybody at doing stupid stuff. So it was, and I've always admired what you did in the sport, and, totally, not connected to any of the allegations or any of the, in the end, what ended up coming out of it. I just think sports are amazing at that level. And, so for me, I was never upset. And it was funny when I finally ran into you in Austin.
I know. That blew me away. I was like, dude, this guy's, that's the coolest thing ever. I don't deserve that.
I don't know if it was the coolest thing ever, but yeah.
Well, nobody else did it. And I nuked a bunch of people, right? And it was a bad place to be in, but nobody else was sending over, overly full glasses of wine. You know what I watched the other day, just since I didn't think we were going to get into this, but since we are, I watched Icarus. Have you seen Icarus? Mm-mm. This documentary about the whole Russian doping scheme?
No, but I've heard little bits about it.
This is next level.
Yep.
Like, it is the craziest, and then it gets really sort of political because of the Russians and their, obviously the hacking but the system. I mean, you talk about the system and
right, systematically approaching it, and it's not like it hasn't been done before. But when I talk about, and again, I've caught shit for this since I was a kid, because I always said, look, I get it. Let's just talk about it. Let's have a meaningful conversation. You want to talk about, like, people like, oh, you believe in the people should be allowed to dope. I said, look, dude, if somebody walking down the street is allowed to do these things legally, it's all good. And it's almost doctors are prescribing things in certain ways, and you can get on these programs for HGH or all these different things. Then what is the purpose of restricting athletes from doing the same things? Like, I just don't, that to me makes no sense. So as I've approached it, as I got older and just kind of, I don't know if it's just not caring as much anymore or people just don't ask me, so I don't think about it the same way. But watching some of the systematic, behavior of some of these, like you said, the Russians, I mean, the Austrians did it, the Germans did it. I mean, there's some shit going on that's pretty high level, as you said. It's supported from the very top. So they're basically taking an approach of like, look, here's how we're going to do it. And to me, that should represent some need for change. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just optimistic.
I get asked the question all the time. Like, people try to get me to go on the record and say, well, you know what, we should just, since the agencies are so ineffective, right? And I'm not knocking on it. It's just a fact, right? We spend tens of millions of dollars to pursue this objective.
Yeah, hundreds of millions in reality, but
right.
all the money is on the other
consider
side.
Worldwide, I'm talking domestically.
Right.
I mean, but it's huge. It's hundreds of millions of bucks, and you catch less than 1% of the people. And again, this is where I have to be a little. Nobody really wants to hear me talk about this, but you have to say, okay, that's not successful.
Well, the problem is that all the money, and it's the same with hackers. It's the same with anything. The money's on the other side of the fence. I mean, there's real motivation on that side. The people on the trying to catch people. I mean. They have a job. They're fine. You catch 1%. Woo, we got somebody. Like, it's like they're just going about their business. They know you can't keep up with somebody on the other side. They're even just to devise the test to figure out how to test for something is such it's so convoluted and slow. I mean, there's no way. The reality is it needs to be approached in a different way. But, like I said, that's
right. That's where they try to get me to, like you were just saying, the dude walking down the street who walks into the anti-aging clinic and gets the testosterone gel and the HGH, and they're like, we should just allow it. I'm like, whoa, I can't, I can't say that, right? I mean, I don't. If you have a kid who, Max, my 8-year-old, wants to race bikes, I don't know that I would be sitting there going, okay, well, this is cool. Then it starts to change the math a little bit for me. That's where I struggle with that.
Right, and that's my old sort of philosophy on it was to really have a panel of people and figure out what's safe. If there's real safety issues, if there's real health risks, especially for different ages, or even because individuals are so different too. If there's real health risks, then that should be your deciding factor, not some random, like I said, convoluted version of what's fair or how to keep sports clean. Because the reality is, between nutrition and supplementation and all the other things that are legal, that are fine, it's not a matter of fair anyway. The well-funded teams are way ahead of the not well-funded teams, not even illegally, just totally above the table. They're just better funded, and they have better research and better doctors and better everything else.
That goes on in skiing?
It goes on in every sport. I mean even the NFL, like, okay, the better funded teams that have better ownership, they're making sure their guys are taken care of, aside from doping. Anything illegal is totally separate, but they're taking care of their guys to a higher level than teams that aren't well funded. Yeah. That's the case across the world. I mean,
you could argue the same with college football.
Yep.
I mean, you just look at locker rooms.
Right. The programs are very different. So fairness is kind of I don't think that's a really good criteria to try to use.
All right, world. It's not, the world isn't fair, people. Just know that. Bode just told. I want to talk about ski racing and skiing, because I've struggled with the ski thing. Like, my whole family loves to ski. We're here in Aspen now. They love to be here. And like, I can't do it. Like the boots, we've talked about ski boots. I hate ski boots. I rented ski boots forever. Have you ever rented ski boots?
Yeah.
Man,
it's horrible.
It's horrible. So I'm like, okay, I'm not doing it. I'm staying home. And then your family's out there without the dad. But the ski thing is like, and I just ski like blues. I don't ski blacks or like you probably ski.
Well, I can tell you that the skiing is more so than any other sport that I've ever participated in. It's super duper equipment dependent. Like, because obviously the contact point from your body to the equipment is your boots, and then the boots go to the skis and the skis go to the snow. So there's these there's these interfaces all the way through, and your bindings even make a huge difference. If you have plates on your skis, makes a huge difference. The tuning of the skis. I mean, you can take a great ski, you know, one of my World Cup skis or whatever that would be a really fun, exciting ski to ski on. You tune it wrong, or the way that they tune rental skis, you tune it that way, it's almost unskiable. It's totally unsafe, and it's a horrible experience to go up and ski on. So, you know, it's been a frustration of mine. It's actually partly why I started. I have a ski company now called Bomber that we build really high-end skis that are accessible to everybody, because you can't. So like any of the skis you'd buy in a shop, I mean, it really doesn't. People are like, "What skis should I buy?" I'm like, "Whatever color you like. It doesn't matter. They're all built in China and Czech Republic. They're all built by the
same thing about bikes.
Half the time, I mean, Fisher's building Rosignol's or Heads. They're building them in their factory. It doesn't. They're not hiding anything.
It's
they're all
same thing as bikes.
They're all trying to build the cheapest stuff, and they've been trying to build it cheaper and cheaper for 35 years. And when you try to do that over and over again, you end up with a shitty product, because inevitably you cut corners in the wrong places, and nobody else really knows because everything else is comparable. So there's no real big difference. And it ends up that people are out there like you saying, Jesus, this just isn't that sweet. It's like, I'm not getting a very good experience out of this. And then they stop doing it, or they don't do it in the first place, or they do it and it's not really safe, and they take risks with their health, and, you know, and that's not worth it either. So, you know, for me, obviously having been privileged from a young age with good equipment, I know what the sport can be, and I know how exciting and fun it can be, but it's such a challenge to get people to get their heads wrapped around it, because it's an old saying, you know, you don't know what you don't know, which is annoying to hear, but it's a fact. Like, you know, you think, oh, fuck, I know what skiing is, and here it is, and it's just not that. I mean, people go out there, even really adamant skiers here in Aspen who spend, you know, 100 days on the snow a year, and they're out there like, oh, this is awesome, and I look at their stuff. I'm like, how can that possibly be fun? If I was on your equipment, I would quit. I would stop entirely.
But when I think about, like, first of all, that's the same thing in cycling. Like, all the bikes, like whether it's a Specialized or a Trek or a Giant or a Can, they all come off the same factory line, right? Out of the same factory, spitting them out. They're just different design, slightly different design, different color and logo. And people ask me, oh, what bike should I get? I said, look, they're all the same. but what you should do, where it does start to make a difference, is probably the same in skiing, is a wheel set, a component groupo, the fit.
Yeah.
Like, forget the bike. Get any bike you want. Get the proper fit.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I think about it, I'm like, well, this sucks, skiing and renting stuff, and I'm like, but if I went to, you know, Connecticut and wanted to ride a bike and rented a bike, I would hate it too.
Right.
I would be like, this is not for me. This thing sucks. Mm-hmm. So it's just.
Right.
I think I'm figuring it out is what I'm trying to say.
When you do get the right equipment, it changes the entire sport. It really does, because without the right equipment, you're better off in the lodge. You just are. And then with the right equipment, and especially conditions also matter. And that's the problem, is like cycling, but much more so, because on a road or whatever, you know, there's still different conditions, and there's different areas where you might ski, but skiing, the conditions can change minute to minute, an hour to hour, and then you're on the wrong stuff again. You started off the morning on a perfect ski, you're having a great day, and then the weather changes and it gets softer or whatever, and then all of a sudden that ski starts to act inappropriately.
You got to qualify in the morning.
Well, it's even just if you're out skiing, just randomly screwing around, and it's groomed in the morning, right? And it's kind of soft, and you're on a ski that's maybe 85 underfoot, and you're just ripping along. It feels great, it's smooth, and you can make turns. You're not chattering. Then all of a sudden, it gets slid off mid-morning when all the skiers are out there. There starts to be some hard patches of kind of chalky, man-made snow, and that same ski is going to start chattering like crazy. It just goes every turn, and it's a horrible feeling, and it hurts your feet and makes you tired and makes your back hurt, and that's just because the equipment wasn't suited to that condition, and that's a problem with skiing. And it's a cumbersome sport that way. But if you get the right stuff and you're willing to invest, there's times when it's a pretty amazing feeling of just zipping down and you're free and you can just, you know, you can do whatever you want. Yeah. And it does take quite an investment, but, you know, the upside is there too.
But on the race side, like, I watched some of this race footage of you and some of these crashes, which are just unbelievable. But, I mean, first of all, these mountains, like, they look like they're 30%. I mean, they are so steep. Right, and most people see that and they're like, oh, I'm going to go side to side here. You boys just stick it straight down the mountain. Like, I can't even believe that somebody would think to do that and to go, what, 70, 75 miles an hour more?
Yeah, we top out at 100. The French kid who
100 miles an hour?
Yeah, just went just over 100. And they don't really have. There's
with
no
Lycra on.
with a little speed suit. Yeah, it's not safe. There's no question about that.
100 miles. I was thinking 70, 75, because this one crash for you, to me, which was just was just super fucked up. Like somehow the ski came back around, sliced your leg. There's a photo of it here on NBC Sports.
Oh, yeah.
Like this gash. It was so deep and so perfect. It didn't even bleed.
No,
like all you saw
no
was
blood. You could see right,
there was no
right
blood.
inside my leg.
Straight into the leg. 100
and
stitches.
that wasn't a fast part of the course. It was just that was a Super G, which is not the faster event anyway, and it was not a fast section. It was just a somewhat dark section where you can't really see that well. And I got a little pinched in on a gate, and that's how quick it happens. I mean, I really didn't make much of a mistake there. I didn't even hook my arm. I actually just got stuck. The panels, they had these weird Jay Lindeberg panels there that they made, and the race organizer was like, we'll use them, and even though they weren't standard, they weren't like qualified, but just politically they were like, we need the logos on there and we'll just use them. And it's like scrunching up a t-shirt and then trying to tear it. Like normally they should come off the panels if there's that much force. These ones they just lock on, and as the gate bends, the more it locks on. It's like a Chinese finger trap. And that's,
we know how that works.
It wasn't really it wasn't really even that much of a mistake, and ended up ending my season that year and caught my hamstring tendon but again, that's crashes are they're so common in that sport. It's amazing that we lost a French guy. So I retired this year for the first actual. I haven't raced for 2 years, but since that crash, but this year was the year that I actually walked away from it and let my spot go, because if I maintain that quota spot, it lets one of the younger guys have a spot to race World Cup. And this year, and everyone was kind of like, you should have raced. You're still fit enough to pull it off, and you could be competitive. Which
we're gonna get to that.
But then I walked away, and sure enough, a guy I grew up skiing with, a French guy, got killed up in Canada training, and then not even a month later, a German kid got killed. Also up there in Canada, just training, and my wife was like,
hitting the ground or hitting a tree?
Yeah, both. So one guy he was actually probably dead before he went into the trees, but then he went into the trees, went through the bee nets. Another guy flipped over the bee nets and into the trees. I mean, you're going fast, and there's trees everywhere. It's like, and there's rocks, and there's cliffs, and there's people. I mean, there's just too much out there. It's amazing it doesn't happen more often. It's only a testament to how hard everybody works to train and be prepared. But it's still,
it's nuts. It's nuts, and like. I guess people think it's nuts to go 75 miles an hour on a bike, right? With a helmet that
with your contact point on the ground being
back in the day, the tires were a lot narrower. But even a blown front tire at 75, and you're toast. Yeah. And so I guess it's similar, but I can't wrap my mind around. And the thing too is like, and tell me if I'm wrong. Is it snow or is it ice? Because in a lot of ways it seems like it's ice.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, in Colorado, because of the altitude and the dryness of the conditions, they can't really make it true ice. They hose it down. They put a bunch of water on it.
That's right, and it freezes.
But it evaporates so quickly at the high altitudes that it ends up being really hard snow. But then there's places where it's straight ice. There's places where you could skate on it with hockey skates on it. You wouldn't make a mark. I mean, just...
And the skis are that sharp. I mean, obviously they're sharp. When you look at this, for the listener, you got to just go online and check this out. I mean, it's like a knife.
Yeah, they're very sharp. I mean, that it barely touched my leg, the back of my leg, and it just opened it right up. I mean, they're not sharp like a knife in terms of like a blade. Right, it's a 90-degree angle or so, but the edge is very, very, it's perfectly sharp. I mean, even just touching a rock or even a piece of wood or anything when you're going will wreck the edge, and it makes it virtually impossible to ski on those courses because you need that super sharp edge to get the grip in the ice.
Right. And you get scared doing that? Like if you're going 100?
Yeah. There's
definitely... Bode Miller get scared. You're like, I'm scared.
Absolutely. And mostly it happens. The fear happens mostly before you start. Every once in a while, you'll get scared in a race, but that's usually a matter of somewhat losing focus or being distracted by a mistake that you made or a perfect situation that comes around, and you kind of you lose focus because the fear generally is more at that point. Once you're actually in the course, things are happening so quickly that it's more functionally involved. You're always, even if you're making a mistake or crashing, you're still trying to figure out how to make it the least detrimental that you can. Right. But before the races, there's always fear involved. Just because the consequences of what you're about to do are so severe, it's probably the same as a descent in cycling where there's a gnarly descent. To make up time on everybody else, you have to take risk. It's just the nature of it. There's 70 other guys out there who are all going to be trying to win a race. Right. So you kind of inherently know you're going to be on the edge and usually past the edge in a lot of different situations, and hopefully it works, and sometimes it's not going to work. And when it doesn't work, the consequences in ski racing are pretty severe.
I guess that's right. I mean, I was always scared, and we would have these moments. Like in cycling, you're either scared when you're fighting for position, like the spring classics, for example, you have to be at the front, right? So obviously, if you have to be at the front, then everybody wants to be at the front. So the battle for position is so gnarly and, like, to me, like, so scary. But I've never had that conversation with other guys. We have done descents, like, going 70 in the rain downhill with 200 guys.
Yeah.
I was completely scared shitless, and I would get to the bottom and you find some English speaking guy, and I was like, dude, that was so, like, were you scared? Mm-hmm. Like, I asked them, and they were like, oh my God, I was so scared. And like, okay, I wasn't the only, but as you're doing it, I'm like, I'm the only guy who's scared here. But they're all scared.
Yeah, World Cup's the same way. And the guys who, there's a certain amount of posturing, and it's also, you're playing mental games with yourself. Because I've watched guys straight walk away from the start. I mean, be at the start, prepared to race, pack up their shit, back on the gondola, download.
Come on.
Done. Yeah, I mean,
because they're scared.
Yeah, they're just, you get to a point where sometimes the mental picture, you want to try to visualize something good happening, and all you're stuck on is something real bad happening in your head. And you can't kick out of a start gate when all you see is yourself cartwheeling into the fence or through the fence into the trees. And yeah, once that gets in your head, some of the guys are smart enough to walk away. Some guys just keep trying to pull through and go, and usually that's when they end up cartwheeling into the fence. So, I mean, it was a long ways into my career before I started realizing that, like, that was something that I was dealing with all the time. I was just dealing with it in a different way than a lot of guys were.
Yeah. What is it? Hesitation equals devastation.
Yeah. Yeah. And
but the start ramp, man, if you watch the footage, it is just, it's straight down. I guess it has to be because you got to get up to 100 sooner than later.
And the skis don't work when you're going slow.
Yeah.
The 218 downhill skis, they only work when you start going, 50 or 60 is about as slow as you can go and have them work at all. And then, they work better the faster you go.
So when you watch these and you never, I don't follow skiing that closely, but if you follow football or follow hockey all they talk about is head injuries and concussions. But if you watch, like the crash that I watched of you, they talked about you slicing your leg. But dude, you hit your head hard. Like, as that thing came back around and you're just ragdolling, like, you hit your head so hard, like that must happen.
It happens all the time.
I mean, concussions must be, but you never hear about it in skiing.
Yeah,
at least that I know of.
Right as of now, I mean, it's a strange thing because I've been around skiing for a long time, and I've watched a ton of crashes, and you honestly, it's almost like, maybe from a somewhat psychedelic philosophical position, you might say that, like, people have made the concussion issue more prevalent, and then you notice it more, and then the consequences are more. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because sure, you see guys get concussed in football, but they're going running speed, so they're hitting each other at running speed. Things like, cycling or mountain biking, where you're going, 10 times that fast, and the impacts are that much more severe. Skiing being one of them, you're hitting ice and you're going, all different speeds, but really, really fast and able to. And we basically, I mean, I can count the number of times I've seen a concussed person, or like even somebody who really felt like they had a concussion. Not that they were ignoring it on purpose, but just like where they had the really, they're cuckoo and they can't remember shit, and headaches and all that. I mean, it just doesn't happen. This is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of crashes that I've seen where people have just knocked their heads like you wouldn't believe, and they're okay. Many. And it's almost because we don't bring it up and because we don't think about it, we don't talk about it. It's like it doesn't exist. And at some point, I'm sure it's going to come around to skiing because it's an obvious target for, and I support all the research and I support all the safety measures, but at the same time, it's like, I don't like the direction that some of these sports are going in, and I don't think the fans do. I don't think, it's hard to manage the change that is implied by trying to make things safer when the sport is inherently really not safe. It's like, how do you take a sport like ski racing that's based around super risk and death-defying, positions and make it safe? It's
that's a football. The argument is that don't let them play tackle until later in life, or make certain hits illegal, or make practices, touch football or what, so. But skiing, I mean, if unless you're going to make the skis so that they can only go, or you guys just ski down blues where you're going 30 instead of 100.
Exactly.
I mean, what are you going to do? Like,
make us be in those sumo suits that are all, padded up and airbags and everything. And
there you go.
It just takes everything away from the sport. So it is. It's a really tough it's a tough conundrum. But the reality is, like I said, it hasn't been a big issue. I'm amazed that more people aren't killed skiing or ski racing. I mean, every year there's people die here every year. Just mishaps where they slide in the trees or something. But in ski racing, with the speeds and the risk that people are taking, that's just people out trying to have a good day and something goes a little bit wrong. When you're really trying to push well past the comfort zone and into areas of severe risk, it's amazing it doesn't happen more often. But as I said, I'm glad that it doesn't.
Like Michael Schumacher. I mean, look.
Yeah, just cruising along.
Awful story.
Yeah,
nobody even you don't even hear about that story anymore. Like, he was like the greatest of all time. Like freak accident with his son, was talking afterwards. Yeah, and then bam.
Yeah,
the guys
and nothing. I mean, going virtually nowhere. Just unlucky.
Jeez. And so let me just get this straight. So these runs, because I am really an idiot when it comes to ski racing. Like, these are like 2 minutes, a minute. How long is the
long ones are 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
2:30. So
and then average for the downhills are like 2 minutes, and then it kind of goes. Super Gs are minute 30 average, probably a little bit more, and then GS is shorter but 2 runs, like one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Their combined time, and then slalom's the same thing, and that's the really quick.
So what's so hard about that? Is it the legs? Is it like a wall sit, like a Roman chair, like where you sit on the wall, or your legs really start to? Is that?
Yeah, it's different in different events, but in downhill it's definitely the legs. Like on the long runs, there's a race in Wengen in Switzerland called the Laberhorn, and that's our longest run. And you go through this, you go under a train. It's all trains up there in the Swiss Alps. Mm-hmm. You park your car down below, you take a train up to the village, and that's where you operate out of, and then the train takes you up to the top of the bottom of the lifts or whatever. And there's a part where the downhill course goes under this train tunnel. The train goes over it, and like you still have a minute left, so that's only a minute and 30 seconds into that run, and already guys are like fully stumping out. Like, lactic acid's up in like 13 already, and 13 starts to be that point where you really lose some function. You can still power through, but you have a minute left, and the last 10 seconds is some of the hardest. There's 2 turns that are just off camber, really dark and super high speed, 75, 80, and you're trying to make corrections when your legs are completely shot. That's where the danger is.
Yes. So for the listener, that 13, you're talking about millimoles. We did a lot of lactate testing, obviously, and the key for us was always where the lactate threshold was, where you know that you could. Once you got above that, you're on the clock. And below that, you're supposed to be able to do that for just below it. You wanted to be push your watts as high as you could and up to the threshold. And so for 13 millimoles, I mean 4 is typically
where that threshold is
the threshold.
Generally.
And so anything above that, like I said, you're on the clock. 13. I mean, you're tasting lactate.
Yeah. You start. That's where guys, and the numbers go really high because you're so used to it. I mean, that's our challenge is that you go, but you have tons of time afterwards. I mean, these are 1 run a day things. So, then we go on, get on a bike and spin, try to get the lactic acid out, and then recover. But when we do it, some days we train, in 5 or 6, 7 runs where the lactic acid is not quite as high, but you're still pushing it all the time. So your body gets really good at tolerating that. But, when it goes up to, 14, 15, you start, you throw up, you get real sick, you start feeling horrible afterwards. And that's normal at the bottom of World Cup runs. I mean, if you're not on the podium, there's a time where you're pretty bummed out because you feel horrible and you lost. It seems like when
you risked your life.
And you risked your life, and you don't get anything for it.
Wow. Are you done racing?
Yeah, I am. I do lots of things like this.
This is a great place to tell the world
Cup.
that you're going to come back. I mean, the head thing, we had the dispute with head. That's going to time out. Maybe it's already timed out. You're watching, you're going to commentate on TV. I know you're sitting there going, all right, let's do this again. People are telling you can do it again.
No, that's the perfect scenario is when you get to go to the Olympics and tell people how easily you'd be winning and how awesome you'd be on that course. And I'd be kicking these guys' asses left and right.
Please don't do that.
But luckily, I don't have to because I'm behind the other side of the fence and on the microphone. No, I don't do that. But actually, ski racing is that way. I mean, I was a very successful professional ski racer, and I won less than 10% of the races I was in, and that's a great number. And so that means 90% of the time I was either getting my ass kicked by 1 or more people or ending up in the fence. So it's a pretty humbling sport. You don't feel that ready to go poking fun at anybody who's still doing it at that point. You're just
so we're done.
Just impressed.
You're not going to tell us all that you're coming back.
No. I'm 40. I'm ready to hang him up.
Yeah. Comebacks are a bad idea. I can tell you that. from experience.
Yeah. I already did a couple, so I know firsthand that they're a bad idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, especially in this sport.
And I read it when NBC announced that you were going to commentate for the Olympics. That's a fine line, right? A lot of these guys are your friends or you raced with, or even if they're not, Americans, guys from all over the world, where you've got to. I had the same experience. Like last summer, I did a podcast, the spinoff of this podcast, where I talked about the tour, and so the great thing is that I could say whatever I wanted, right? And it might be different if you're on NBC. There, you can't say whatever you want, but you got to call it the way you see it, even if it's a good friend of yours that you raced with, or a kid you work with, or a kid you help out. You got to, if they screw up, you got to say they screwed up.
Yeah, and it's like I said, the ski racing it'd be one thing if it was, swimming or something like that, where I felt like, there was a real even playing field. But there's so much going on in skiing that you do see mistakes and you see stupid mistakes. But even though you can call those out, it's really easy to be gentle on the guys in a way that's still very real and authentic. I mean, like I said, I've been there. I know I made, like I said, 90% of my races, I was getting my ass beat, and I was very successful. So for these guys who are, trying to find their way, or young guys trying to come up, it's like, it's easy to be impressed with everything they're doing, just because, like I said, going out of the start gate on some of these races is a challenge enough. And, it's not like hopping in the pool, or it's, in some cases, even stepping out on the field or whatever, where, this is every single time is like, it's pretty risky and it's got to be scary. And they're pushing it every single time. It's like when I now being, retired and out of it, it's so not appealing. I think there's a certain switch that goes off in your head too, where like I'd been preparing myself to be able to do that for a long time, and I got used to tolerating that risk. And now it's just, with the kids and all that, it just seems like such a ridiculous risk to take for
having
me.
kids.
Yeah.
Right. Now you see it all the time in cycling with sprinters, right? The best sprinters in the world are the best when they don't have kids. So they have their first kid, you see them, they touch the brakes. Yeah. Quicker than they used to, and then they have a second kid, and then they're all over the brake. The third kid, and then they retire. They're like, they just won't. They won't go there. They don't have they're in the back of their head. They're like, wait, I want to pick up my kid tonight. And it just that's when
that's why they call it a young man's sport. It really it's not a. People, there are the anomalies, the exceptions to the rule, but in general, it's like clockwork. As soon as kids come into the picture, you're like, whoa, I gotta start paying attention a little bit. You don't feel, quite as wide open throttle, and that makes a difference in a sport like skiing.
Wasn't Lindsey Vonn? This is totally random. It has nothing to do with your kids or my kids, but I think I read this. Wasn't Lindsey Vonn wanting to ski against the men? Did I read that?
Yeah, but I think it's been going on she brought it up years and years ago, and every once in a while we'll train with the girls, right? So we'll train, but like in a place like Copper, in Colorado here, and it's just the easiest thing. I mean, there's no way to make up any time. You're just tucking. You go out of the start and you're tuck. You just tuck and you kind of roll along a little bit. And she's got great touch. She's not a little girl, and she's got fast skis, and she's smooth. She's good aerodynamics, and she'll be right there. She'll be close, and she'll beat some of the guys, some of the younger guys who have crappy skis. And Lindsey had a bunch of my skis, which were the fastest in the world after I first switched off head in like 2009 or when I first retired. And she'd be in touch, and she'd be like, oh, I want to race against the guys. And they raced in Lake Louise, and she's killed it up there. She's won that race a bunch of times, and we raced the same hill. They set it differently, and our speeds are different and all that, but that was more or less where it came up. But then she's brought it up in other places too.
I thought I read it recently.
Yeah, she brought it up again, and I've talked to her about it, and I mean, I don't know if she does it for publicity or if she actually is serious about it, but it would not be a good idea in any way because she would get killed time-wise, but she would also put herself at crazy risk, which she's racing on the girls' courses and still has a lot of risk. I mean, she's still getting hurt, and she's recovering from injuries all the time, and she's really trying to manage her body. If she tried to go down Kitzbühel or Bormio or Wengen, I mean, she's a great skier, and I think she's either the best or one of the best we've ever seen, men or women, on the sport. And she would just be in the fence so quickly. It would be painful.
Okay, so Lindsey, this is a bad idea. Bode just says don't do it. But the crazy thing too about her, just last thing on her is like, because I read I get my ski news from the newspaper, the New York Times or the Austin paper or whatever. It's like one day you read that she's crashed and she's injured, and then the next day you read that she won or got the silver. And I'm like, wait a minute, I thought she's injured. Like maybe because they're different disciplines, or she can manage the injury. she's a badass.
Yeah, she's been. I mean, to come back from what she's come back to and still be in there trying to win is, like I said, it's impressive.
Yeah. So you grew up literally without electricity or running water?
In the beginning, yeah. I mean, my parents were old school. Like, my dad was in medical school. His two older brothers were doctors. His father was a doctor, and he was being fed into the machine of, that. And he was in his third year medical school, and he got pissed off because there was some political stuff with one of his professors, and he dropped out and married my mom and moved up into the woods on our property that my mom's parents owned, 400 acres in New Hampshire of just woods. And they found this cool spot up by a river, and all their hippie friends, got together and built a cabin. They just cut down the trees and made a cabin out of the trees they cut down. And I was born in that house. I mean, my dad was because
a midwife, right?
Yeah, my mom was a midwife, but also my dad, being through medical school, was pretty capable. So we were all delivered at home, and till I was 8 or so, I was homeschooled, and just all I did was play in the woods and play tennis all summer.
Like, you had your brother had this name, like it's on Wikipedia. Like I was like, whoa,
yeah,
like 4 or 5
my
names.
My two younger siblings have had crazy names, and mine is pretty straightforward. But I think as it went down, I think it was really, we each got to pick a name for them. So it was like it just kept getting longer and longer the more
you get to pick a name for your sibling.
Yeah.
All right. What'd you pick?
I think mine was bungo, wind rushing, which is like, the bungo is a Indian name for the wind that blows through there. It's kind of like, I mean, a lot of places have special wind. This wind howls, it like knocks trees down and stuff. It stays north of the mountains. The Indians call it the bungo. So and it blew on the day my little sister was born. And I was only 2, 2.5. So I think that was like one of the only things I knew. So she had some seriously crazy hippie names.
That wind will drive you crazy. Like, I think it's proven that, like,
if it blows a lot, you go Looney Tunes.
Yeah, the highest suicide rates, at least in this country, are in the windiest cities, like these remote windy places where it's just always windy, and people just go nuts.
Yeah.
I hate wind, man. I hate wind for riding bikes, and I hate wind. The two
it
things I love
for
to
skiing
do.
Too. It's the worst.
Well, there you go. I never would have thought about that. But like riding bikes and playing golf, the wind is like the worst. And like, this is the two things I do.
Yep.
Dude. So but you didn't stay there, right? You went off to boarding school and
yeah.
I heard this.
My mom and dad separated when I was 6. We lived up there for another 2 years, and my mom was just a total badass, like hippie,
Dad leaves?
Mountain. Yeah, he went to Tennessee to work, try to make some money, and they were separated at that point. And so my mom lived up there with 4 kids, only wood burning stove, walking in, because you couldn't drive a car up there in the winter. So you're pulling a sled with, 4 kids, 2 of them. I mean, we're all small at that time.
She's like, I'm out.
Yeah, she was like, this is crazy. I can't do this anymore. So then we moved down into my grandmother's old house, and she moved to a new house. And she was fighting cancer at the time. And so then we started going to school because it was just too much on everybody. So my older sister and I, and my little sister all went to the same little, tiny little New Hampshire school. Mm-hmm. And I was there into the beginning of high school, 8th grade. And then I was pushing pretty hard. I think already at that point, I was starting to, being the man of the house after my dad left, I kind of had more responsibility and and I also just never felt, I wasn't the same as my siblings at all. I knew I wasn't going to stay in New Hampshire. And everybody there normally is just like, New Hampshire is what it is. You get your job, or you work out, you do landscaping, or do whatever it is. And you live your little, and I was like, even at that age, I kind of knew that that wasn't my program. So, when I was 14, 13, I went to boarding school, and was pretty, again, those are, it's strange to think of it now, because it was like, those were I had to push hard to do it. Like, it wasn't like somebody was making me go, but I was like leaving all my friends, leaving my comfort zone where I was like kind of the big fish in a small pond, and going to a boarding school where I was like the worst kid there, and I was poor, and I was living in a, day student's house so I could afford it. I was working all summer to pay for it. It was like, to think of it now, like, I don't know if my kids are going to have that kind of, I don't know what it was, stubbornness or drive or whatever. I was like, I was grinding. You're not stubborn. I was grinding all summer, building tennis courts to pay for my ski racing in the winter. It was like, I guess kids are different now. Maybe we lived in a different time, but like, yeah.
You skied yesterday. We have some really dear friends here in Aspen, Adam and Melanie Lewis, and they must have bought it as part of the Ajax auction or something, but they're super rad. And so she was telling me, I saw her last night at this other thing. She was telling me, you were telling stories yesterday about going to boarding school and maybe you were goofing off or something, but the school was like, okay, you kind of suck at skiing. You need to switch to snowboarding. And for you, at least according to Mel, was like, that was like, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I'd always been pretty gifted in things. Like school was so easy. It was a really pretty basic public school, so it wasn't hard. I never even brought my books home. I didn't have to do homework. I'd just do it in school. And I never got A's, but I was always like B's. And, I never was even close to getting in trouble for stuff. I did well on tests, and I was good at different sports. I was kind of the leader on our sports teams through high school. And when I went up there, like I said, all of a sudden I was out of my element. I didn't have any, I was like meeting new friends. I was the littlest kid in the school, and I was lazy, and I just didn't know what drive was at that point. And I think mentally I was ready for it, and so they had an intervention, straight up sat me down with 7 or 8 people all circled around me in the office, and my advisor and my coaches and the dean, the headmaster of the school, and they basically laid into me like, you suck, you're lazy, you're just coasting along in a bubble, like something's going to automatically happen, you got to get your shit together. And at the time it was like, immediately I clammed up and was like, fighting back tears, but I was like, screw these people. They don't know, it's not, what do they care anyway? It's like, once I'm out of here, they're just going to have new kids come through school, right. And it is what it is. It's screw them. But then after, I had time to digest it and kind of, and that was where they said, look, you're not coming back next year because we're giving you financial aid that allows you to come here, and we're not going to let you back unless you switch to snowboarding, because they had a snowboard team and I was better at snowboarding than I was at skiing at that time. And again, it was, if they hadn't said anything, I probably would have considered it. But the fact that they were telling me I had to, otherwise I wasn't going to be allowed back, just pissed me off and pushed my buttons the wrong way. And I just, dug my heels in. And even my uncle was like, yeah, you should switch, and I don't know if he was doing it intentionally because he knew it would piss me off. But from that point forward, I was much more focused and like determined to shut him up.
Yeah, that has to be one of the most pivotal moments of your life, right?
Yeah, one of them. Yeah. And there was a whole series of those type of things that happened all through that time that were like that. One of my coaches, the year before I went to boarding school, a coach had me disqualified from a race because I would lay into him all the time. I wouldn't listen to him. I'd blow off training because I thought he was a garbage coach, and in hindsight he was. But I was 12 years old and had no business, telling him that to his face and having arguments.
I hope he's
with
not
him.
Listening.
Walter Brown.
Calling him out.
You know who you
by
are.
Name.
And he disqualified me from a race and had me disqualified for, so I thought I was in. He had me disqualified after the race had happened. So me and everybody else thought I'd qualified for the Junior Olympics. They go to announce the team. I'm not on it. We go back and research. Turns out he'd called the guy after the race was over and said, oh, he admitted that he missed a gate. You should disqualify him. And that was another one where to go from a young kid of like your whole season goes to the Junior Olympics at the end of it, and you're robbed by some petulant adult. It was like, it was the most, it was the worst feeling I'd had at that point, being, bullied on and like just had no power, no control. And that was, so then I had these series of things like that for 3 years in a row that were pretty much like, I would say, defined the direction that I took for the rest of my, my life basically. Yeah, and they were shitty things. Each one of them was negative, which is strange because I'm more of a person who believes like encouragement and positivity helps, but there's no denying that those challenges or, facing adversity that way or really dealing with crappy situations a lot of times has a more impactful, role in people's lives or decisions.
That's what shaped you as an athlete and as a dude, right? I mean, some of those things don't happen. You might have been sitting on your ass, lazy and
in New Hampshire.
Where's Dad? Dad ever come around?
Yeah, he's great. We've always had a great relationship. Him and my mom never fought. They were just like, they did it like hippies would. Oh, I don't really love you as much anymore. Okay, let's be friends then. And they just leave. It's strange the way that generation from the 60s work. Yeah. I've never seen them fight. They're still good friends. They talk all the time. They live right next to each other now. My dad moved back with a woman that he's been now with for 33 years, and he lives right down the road from us. And they work. My dad worked at our tennis camp forever and helped out, and so he's been a big part of my life. Just not because he's so passive, and we're sort of different in certain ways. He hasn't really been as active in my sports career, but it's definitely been he's been a great role model for me as well.
Let's talk about horse racing. Because I don't understand this obsession that you have with horses and horse racing and the Kentucky Derby. You haven't missed a Kentucky Derby since 1999.
Well, I missed one 2 years ago.
You did?
Yeah, because
this article was wrong.
Well, exactly. But it wasn't until that point I had been to a bunch of them in a row. And then my son was going to be born 2 years ago in May. And we were like, Morgan was like, oh, we should still go. You know, my wife was like, we should go. And I'll just be huge pregnant there. And like, there's cute dresses for super pregnant ladies and whatnot. And I was like, no way, because if he's born like on Derby Day, we're gonna have to name him like the winning horse or something. Right. And so we ended up skipping and staying home, and it was, you know, it was a streak I didn't give a shit about, but it was the sport has always been in. My grandfather used to go to the track down in southern New Hampshire and you know, make bets on the horses, and I grew up around animals.
So that's
I don't know that's where it is. I think it's just really similar to ski racing. There's so much that has, you know, as you probably know, you spend your whole life in a sport, you get all these really weird skills, but they're really generally only applicable to that sport. Right. Sometimes, like, I can handicap crazy because I'm used to, in ski racing, you have these things, penalties, like it's how you decide your points. There's a FIS system and a USSA system. USSA is the nationwide in America, and then FIS is worldwide. And you have to rank yourself against all the other FIS athletes worldwide. So you have to see how a race in Vermont compares to the race in Colorado versus a race in Switzerland. And the system is based on how many good guys there are in that race, how many of the good guys finish in the top 10, and the spread of how far those guys who finish in the top 10 are off the winner.
It's like a handicap system.
Right, it's a handicapping system, and it's based on the slope of the hill and how many gates there were and all this different stuff. So it's calculus or something like that, but we learned how to do it when we were 8 years old because we cared about it. We didn't think of it as math. We were just figuring out how we ranked against everybody else. And that same system works for handicapping horses. It's like analyzing a track here, knowing how fast a horse is likely to run in one position or another and what their style is. And so when I first started getting into horse racing, it was more luck. Visa had the Visa Triple Crown, and they brought me to the Derby. And I watched it, and it was awesome. It was exciting. It was the same thing as skiing. It was really objective. There was no judging. It was just start to finish. It was raw. The horses all like to run. That's what their nature is. They have a great time doing it, and they bust ass, and it's risky. They know they're risking their lives. Sure. It's sketchy, and
the jockeys risk their lives.
And the jockeys do as well. It's when you're in a group of horses like that. Yeah, there's huge risk. So there was just a lot of appeal
like
to it.
Pounds, you know, like
they're tiny little wisp of guys, and they get stomped on and rolled over on, and yeah, they're crazy. I mean, they're athletes too. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do.
But to get in the game, I mean, horses are not cheap. I mean, I guess if you want to get in the game, if you had endless amounts of money, you want to get in the game, you buy some horses, you buy a stable or a farm or whatever, and you like go down there and, you know, clap and cheer and we won. Like it's
right. In general, it's the reason they call it the sport of kings is because you need to be a king basically to make it happen. I mean, but my system was based on, it was the same. I've done it a bunch of times where I'm generally like, okay, I'm not interested in the sport because of these hurdles or because of this whatever. And then sometimes you kind of can flip it around in your head and be like, actually, that's the reason I would be involved in it. And in this case, it was the sport was so inaccessible, and it was really, I think they're doing a crappy job. They're not really training the horses. They're more or less just babysitting them. There's been this really weird trend to try to keep them from getting hurt, but all they're doing is getting them hurt more. And they don't use sports science at all. They don't use anything. And the times are still holding up from Secretariat's era. And people would say, oh, maybe that, you know, they were on different drugs at that time or whatever. Maybe. But the point is, in human sports science has moved the needle a lot. I mean, moving the needle 10, 15% in the human world is totally doable. You know, from somebody who's not trained at all to being very well trained.
So that's your goal.
In some cases, it's more than that. In this sport, you and I could go buy a horse for $5,000 tomorrow, who's within 5% of American Pharoah right now. And American Pharoah is a $50 million horse, you know, and then we'll probably make, you know, the Tappet is the top stallion right now in the country. Is $300,000 per live foal, so per cover, and he'll book out in the breeding shed.
This is all Greek to me.
So in the breeding shed, right? So every mare that he's bred to, who has a baby,
so $300,000
is
for him to have sex with a girl horse
per bang. $300,000.
This guy's got I mean, what a life!
And he'll book out 160 per year. So he's doing $60 million a year.
Wow.
In the door, and he'll breed for 15 years. So, I mean, horses like that can bring you almost $1 billion, one horse just breeding. So
we need to go buy
so
one
the
of those
breeding,
horses.
the breeding is where it happens, but you get there from a various, sort of way. So I ended up, the way that I did it was always focused on that, because then if you get a horse that's breeding well and that's bringing in significant money, then you fund your racing operation based on your budget from your breeding operation. And that's the only place. You go to like a place like Windstar or Coolmore, I mean, they have gold statues, and it's like those are the places that are printing the money.
But you got horses that are going to be, are these like horses that you take down to the local track, or are these like Kentucky Derby horses?
Well, I have both. That's the point in horse racing, and it's partly, you could compare it a little bit to like NASCAR, right, or Formula One, where they're so close together. All these horses are so inbred, and they're so that the difference between a $5,000 claiming horse that we could get tomorrow and American Pharoah is statistically is more like 5%. I mean, at a minute and 40 seconds, which is about a mile and a 16th, American Pharoah might run a 140, 100 seconds. And the horse that I have right now in my barn that I bought for 15 grand or 20 grand can go 144, 143. So you're talking about 3% difference statistically. And we're not doing anything. I mean, literally the training routine right now for thoroughbred horses, and this is basically uniform across the country. There's small deviations.
D. Wayne Lucas, all
those guys. Yep. They'll take a horse out of the stall where it stands 23 and a half hours a day. They walk it around a thing for 10 minutes, just with somebody on the halter, just walking it. They'll saddle it up. A guy gets on, he walks it out to the track. It runs around the track one time real slow, just kind of cruising, back in the stall. 23 hours in the stall, it'll hot walk maybe around that thing.
That was their training day?
That's a normal day. Then once every 7 to 10 days, it comes out, does virtually the same thing, does a little warm-up lap, and then breezes normally 5 furlongs, which is less than 3/4 of a mile, at slightly lower than race speed. So, 80%, 90%, something like that, 80%. Breezes up to, maybe Bob is one of the guys who goes a little longer. He might go 6 furlongs, which is 3/4 of a mile, or maybe 7 furlongs. So basically their training consists of virtually nothing, a slight warm-up 7 days in a row or 6 days in a row, and then one time where they go slower than race speed and significantly shorter distance than races would be, and then back in their stall. And then once every month, they go out and they do basically no warm-up and go blasting out and go 100% for a longer distance. So they go faster speed than they ever train and longer distance than they ever train. And they wonder how come they're hurting horses.
Because when this horse a couple of years ago won the Triple Crown, and it happens with these horses that are about to win the Triple Crown, like the owner and the trainer and the commentators. Not that I watch a lot of horse racing, like the Kentucky Derby is like the Tour de France. Like it's the only thing idiots like me know. So, but they're all talking about you get to the third peg of the Triple Crown, and they're talking about how tired the horse was. Tired, the first 2 races. I'm like, wait, the Kentucky Derby wasn't that like a month ago? Like, how are you tired?
Yeah,
like,
especially a horse that's meant to, if you put it in nature, it's meant to do interval training basically all day, every day.
Okay.
So it'll run and then eat some grass, and then run hard and eat some grass, and run hard and eat some grass. That's all they do. They're a prey animal. So whatever's chasing them, they have to run away from it. They don't have a fight mechanism, so they just run. And these guys are, like I said, they're running them once a month, and they're acting like that's going to fatigue them so much. And they're going one bout of like slow speeds. It just doesn't. You're exactly right. That was why I ended up wanting to get involved, because I said there's just no way that these animals are even close to their peak fitness or peak ability when this is their routine. I mean, even if they are absolute physical specimens, which they are, and they have all these amazing adaptations to avoid prey, which is really what we're trying to stimulate them to do, is run as fast as they can. But there just has to be much more there. And the sport is incredibly well funded. I mean, there's, hundreds of millions of dollars of prize money all over the place, and the breeding operation is really, it's
because I watched the interview you did with Graham Benzinger, where they showed you have a treadmill for the horse, you have a hyperbaric chamber, you have this system where mold and like allergies are taken out of the air,
air filtration system.
And that's like the horse. Let's just start with the horse treadmill, right? No other dudes have horse treadmills.
Well, in South Africa, Michael de Kock, who's the best trainer there, uses them quite a bit.
He grew up with that name.
And I think they use them in actually in Scandinavia. It changed the standard bred industry. The guys came in there with treadmills and did interval training and just absolutely blew everybody else away.
I would think with that kind of money on the line, you would have all of these things at your disposal, just like a skier or a cyclist or a marathoner or the New England Patriots. I mean, I would think you'd have all that. Like, that
right,
seems
and
so obvious.
the problem is that the wealthy people are already established, right? So they already have their top trainers, and all things being equal, buying a better horse works, right? I mean, if you're not training, if everyone's doing the same thing, which is what's happening, everyone's doing the same thing, then the better horses win. So the more money that you spend on a horse, the trainers get paid 10% on the purchase price and 10% of prize money and 10% of the sale price. So it's kind of weird because they're motivated to have the person buy a more expensive horse or pay more for the same horse if they wanted to. So, for me, I make an extra, $100,000 if I get you to pay $2 million instead of $1 million for a horse. So it's like the whole system is kind of upside down a little bit. You'd think it would be better to motivate them to save you money and buy good horses, but it's the opposite. So, as it stands now, the processes that make the difference aren't big enough to overcome the need to buy the best horses, to buy those $1.5 million, $2 million horses.
There's no guarantee if you pay the $300,000 stud fee. There's no guarantee that you're going to have a
Absolutely
Kentucky Derby
No,
winner.
it's still a very low percentage.
Right, because if he's having that many kids,
he's having a ton, right?
He's having a lot of kids. I mean, they're not obviously only one horse wins.
One per year, exactly, wins the Derby, and it's statistically it's a very difficult sport that way because I mean of the 40,000 or so that babies that are born each year, I think only like less than 1,000 ever win a race of any sort. Yeah. So it's like, and of that, it's like 1% of that win a stakes race. So it's really it's not statistically. It's not a good sport.
Are these horses? Are your horses going to be in the Kentucky Derby? Like the one horse race that? I mean, what's the other one? The Preakness and then the Belmont. The Belmont. I mean,
and then the Breeders' Cup is huge. It's starting to actually get some traction. Where the prize money is much bigger for the Breeders' Cup, but the prestige is higher for the Triple Crown.
Are we going to see you on TV there? I mean, or are you racing down at the Maryland Downs?
We do both. I mean, it's always kind of it's a mix, right? So you try to get your horses into races they can win, and then as they win or as you see how good they are, because again, nobody really knows how good they are until they're in a race because they're all so close. When they train, that training that I talked about where they go 5 furlongs, the best horses in the world do the exact same times as the worst horses. I mean, they all run 80% of race speed. They're all doing the same thing. So you can't tell anything from training unless you're a real horseman, in which case you're really doing it with your eyes. You're not looking at the time or the speed. You're just looking at a move and you say, that horse looks like it can move really easy. It looks smooth. Right. That's a better horse.
Speaking of smooth, the funniest thing, and I got to give it to you, this Graham, and for the listener, you could just go on YouTube or just type your name in on YouTube. It comes up, this interview with Graham Benziger. You're outside of one of the stalls and there's this horse and you were like, yeah, he has a really bad attitude, or he was very, super aggressive. He's like, he had these huge balls and like, we had, we cut off his balls and I think he was just hurting. His balls were so big when he would run, like that would hurt. And you could see, and I was like, did he just say what I think he said? That, like the horse was upset because his balls were too big to run.
Yeah. And it happens. They'll twist a nut.
Nobody expects you to say that.
Just like humans, they'll twist a nut or something. They get real mad.
Yeah, no, I would be mad too, especially me.
That horse did get a little bit nicer, but he's still kind of a dick. He didn't fix what we'd hoped.
Well, he's a dick because you cut off his balls.
Now he's just mad about that. Right. Mad about something different.
I would be. And it's legal to gamble at like the Kentucky Derby and these things.
Yeah. And the betting is a huge part of it. It's really what drives the sport.
And you do that.
Yeah, I don't really bet big, and I bet like smaller amounts, but I bet them, across races, and because my strength is handicapping and picking horses, and I'm involved enough to know more than the average person, so I can. Okay. And if you know how to bet well, it's about hedging and taking your risk where it makes sense.
So
and
on May 3rd, let's assume the Derby's the 5th. May 3rd, you will be getting a text from me.
Send me the picks.
The picks. What are the picks? Because I love the gamble on the golf course. It's like gambling with a side of golf.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, man. Before we go, let's talk about. I want to talk about the Turtle Ridge Foundation. I don't want to get out of here without talking about the good stuff you guys do. So you and your family started. This is.
Yeah, I started originally.
Crazy that most people in your position would call it the Bode Miller Foundation. It was the Lance Armstrong Foundation, and it's the Turtle Ridge Foundation. Most people wouldn't even associate the two.
Right. Now it's probably it's always a battle of trying to attract the attention and make it was easier to call it the Bode Miller Foundation for sure. But at some point I fade into irrelevance, as we all do, and I want it to kind of be able to sustain itself and not be so attached to my deal. And the idea also was we didn't really ever want to get too big, because when you get a certain size, efficiencies go out the window, money starts to go funny places, and it's hard to manage. And we wanted more to be a model of how to bring some accountability to a small town where people generally should be taking care of each other. And they generally do a good job, but we needed to be a hub to kind of attract that attention. That was really the goal. And so we have stayed small over, whatever it is, 15 years now, but it's been cool to see, because it empowers people. I mean, and we didn't want to bring in the big corporate money that then makes people who donate $50 or $100 or $500 feel dumb when there's, money coming in that's 500,000. And I think that's an important piece of what it means to have a good foundation too, is empowering people to give what they can instead of making them feel dumb for only having a little bit of money to give. And but the foundation we've changed focus a little bit recently. We're adaptive sports for primarily handicapped, disabled kids and athletes, and then we were youth sports as well from the beginning. And then we moved into production of this monoski because they were too expensive, and we were just wasting money because we were buying basically retail production monoskis for $10,000 a piece and trying to fund these individuals or programs, and it was too much, right? So then we started building our own.
That's the ski?
Yeah, I took a bunch of the good ones, reverse engineered them, and skipped a bunch of patent stuff, and just started producing them ourselves. So we could produce 3 or 4 for the same price we were buying one before, and that allowed us to be really much more effective with getting them out there and getting people on the hill. Because at the end of the day, that was the limiting factor, was there just simply wasn't enough monoskis. There was way more people who needed them than there were skis.
So monoskis, if you're paralyzed from the waist down,
you sit in a seat, and you're on a single ski, and
your poles looks like
little skis on them. Yep. And it's unbelievable hard, but the guys
think of the core on that, dude.
The guys, and some of the people are paralyzed higher up, or they don't have stomach muscles, so they're basically just using their shoulders to tip the thing back and forth. I've done it. All I do is wreck. I don't go anywhere. Right. And have all my muscles through, but yeah, it's been, and now we're on to, so we're going to keep producing those, but we're back to primarily granting money to opportunities, getting kids into the mountains or people into the mountains, and summer camps and stuff like that. And it's New Hampshire is our primary focus, but we have ties across the country, and we grant money across the country. Different foundations. Hand
bikes,
Yeah, we do hand cycles. Yeah. We try to, but again, we have to buy them, and they're how expensive that stuff is. $10,000 gets you a normal hand cycle, and it's just a lot of money for us to raise. But then, in New Hampshire, there's so many kids who just come from families that just don't have money, and they need the opportunities to get out there and participate in sports or go places. So it's a tight group, and we have a lot of really positive feedback from being able to change people's lives at that micro level, even though it's not, we're not changing hundreds of thousands of lives. That I know, your foundation, some of these really monster foundations like, Michael J. Fox or those, but I think you need both, because some of those issues are huge and they need massive attention, and they need corporate money and corporate focus. And then some of them are small, where it's more people taking care of people.
No, there are plenty of days go by. I wish that, like you, it started as the Lance Armstrong Foundation, or like you just alluded to. And then when it transitioned to Livestrong, I was almost like, thank God my name is not on the door, because to me that feels weird. But point being, back when it was the LAF days, there's something about being small and just having high impact and being able to do, to know exactly what you're doing. Whereas once you're raising $50 million a year, it's like, okay.
Yeah. And it's going all over the place. And that's important to do as well, but you need both, certainly. Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being cool. Thanks for forgiving me for being such a douche back in the day.
No worries.
Yeah, it's all good. Let's go skiing. I got my new boots.
I already warned you about that. I like letting people make their own mistakes.
Okay, well then I owe you 2 texts. One, I'll give you feedback on my boots that I just got the other day. I'm very, very excited. I've never been excited to ski in my whole life. Number 1. Number 2, May 3rd, I'm going to text you for the picks.
I'll have them ready.
All right, thanks, buddy.
All right.